Good morning and welcome. I am Joan Underwood, and for the next 40 minutes or so, I will be engaging you on the topic, stepping up to a high performance culture. So let's dive right in. How exactly do we map workplace culture and the achievement of key performance targets? In other words, how do we ensure that our walk matches our talk? The approach that I've chosen to adopt in answering this question this morning is to share with you a blueprint, a concrete plan for your consideration and hopefully implementation. We will begin by defining culture in general terms before proceeding to define what exactly is high performance culture. And having defined that, we will then outline what's required to build a solid foundation for a high performance culture. But a building isn't just made up of a foundation. Once we have that foundation blueprint in place, we then proceed to erect a high performance superstructure. And because this conference is all about HR, I will then wrap up the presentation by sharing the specific role that HR needs to play in order for us to erect this high performance culture and have it transform into a high performance organization. So what exactly is culture? Well, I have for your consideration three different definitions. The first one comes from CIPD. And they define culture as a set of beliefs and values shared by members of the same organization, and that those beliefs and values influence the behavior of the individuals within the organization. Or if you want a less formal definition, we have this one by Balogun and Johnson. Culture is simply how we do things around here. And there's a third definition also from a CIPD publication. So you see they refer again to the values and the beliefs. In this version of their definition, they've added in principles. And together, those values, beliefs, and principles serve as the foundation for an organization's management system, as well as management practices and behaviors, which then reinforce those principles. So that's the definition of culture generally. So what makes culture high performance? And in keeping with our blueprint metaphor, we'll start with the foundational elements. So a high performance culture is a culture in which employees perform well because they are engaged, they feel valued, and they're continually learning. So what do we need to have in place? What's the concrete and the steel that we put into this foundation? That would be a strong mission, a cohesive vision, clear, achievable goals, and core values that foster a shared sense of purpose. So when we have these four key elements in place, we have a solid foundation upon which we can build. So with our foundation in place, we can proceed to erect our superstructure for our high performance culture. And here we're referring specifically to employee satisfaction, employee engagement, and psychological safety. So we'll take a deeper dive into all of those elements. Now, context matters. And we have W. Edwards Deming, who is famous for his work with quality. And he stipulated that a bad system will beat a good person every time. So rather than risking having a bad system, let's look at what we need in order to ensure that we have a good system. And to do so, we draw on the McKinsey 7S framework. Now, this is a very old model, but it is it remains very valid, very helpful in the context of culture and in the context of creating and sustaining high performance organization. So in this model, 7S, as the name indicates, there are 3 what we refer to as hard S's, and then 4 soft S's. So let's look at what, starting with the hard S's. So we have strategy, structure. Okay, so what type of organizational structure do you have? And then there are the systems, the defined systems within the organization. Okay, and those are things that you can typically find that would be committed to paper, so you can look and see, this is what the organization strategy is, here's its the structure, whether it's a hierarchical, a matrix, you know, a modular structure that will be stipulated, and then you will have different systems operating within the organization. In terms of the soft S's now, we have the skills, which are evident within the organization. Of course, you have the staff and the style and shared values. And so for our purposes, the shared values, that's the culture. Remember, if we think back to the definitions that we just looked at. So the shared values, you can think of them as a culture. And when they refer to style, they're actually referring to the leadership within the organization. What is the style or the approach to leadership within the organization? Now, the 7S framework stipulates that these 7 elements are all interrelated, interconnected, and need to be in alignment. So your structure needs to be aligned with the type of leadership that you have, with the culture that you have. Your staff need to be aligned with the strategy. You need the skills, the requisite skills, in order to be able to execute your strategy. Also, you need the right staff in order to be able to use the systems effectively. So this is a holistic, comprehensive approach to ensuring that you have a high-performance organization. Now, following on the message from the McKinsey 7S framework, it is in alignment and balance are very important if the system, if the structure is to stand up to time. And so let's begin to expand on our blueprint in terms of how we can ensure that things are in balance and that we have what we need in alignment for a high performance culture. So remember, we said in the foundation, our concrete and our steel would consist of a strong mission, a cohesive vision, clear and achievable goals, and the core values that foster a shared sense of purpose. So I put it to you that this is priority 1, having those elements in place, your mission, your values, your vision. Once you have identified and established that, we can then cascade them down into the strategy. So you have your strategic intent, you have your drivers, you know, what is going to be driving your strategy, what is going to be enabling your strategy. And then when you come to the execution phase, you will have your specific targets and initiatives, you'll have performance indicators that will enable you to monitor and evaluate your progress and to course correct if that becomes necessary. So then up next, and again, we're working with the McKinsey 7S framework. So we would need to identify if there are any areas that are out of alignment with this big picture that we have outlined there. Having then identified if any of the 7 S's are out of alignment, we then need to ascertain what changes would we need in any of the 7 S's, whether it's your structure and the systems and the skills that you have in your style of leadership. What do we need to change in order to give us an excellent organizational design? So having identified those changes, we then proceed to implement them and to constantly review all 7 elements to ensure that they remain in alignment. Because any change in either the external or the internal environment can disrupt that alignment, that balance that we need in order for our system to work well. So that's our foundational element. So let's now start working on our superstructure. So you will recall that the superstructure includes psychological, employee engagement, and employee satisfaction. And I put it to you is that, again, in keeping with the blueprint metaphor, with the construction metaphor, that the psychological safety after the foundation is the next level. People need to feel safe within the organization if they are to be engaged and if they are to have employee satisfaction. So let's take a deeper dive. So on the ground floor, as mentioned previously, we have psychological safety. And drawing on the work of Timothy Clark, I'd like to share with you 4 stages of psychological safety. And we begin with inclusion safety. What do we mean by inclusion safety? Simply that everyone within your organization is confident that they are a valued member of your team. So from day one, from the selection process, your onboarding process, your people know, hey, I belong here, I'm valued here. This is essential for you to have a high-performing team. Now, after we have inclusion safety, the next level up is learner safety. So being confident that they belong, your people also need to know that it is safe for them to learn on the job. It's not as if they have to hide if they don't know something. They can be vulnerable. They can admit when they don't know. They feel safe asking questions, which might indicate a lack of understanding. So that's the second component, learner safety. Progressing on from learner safety, we have contributor safety. So having become a member of the team, feeling included, understanding that it's safe to learn here, they can contribute to the success of the team, to the high performance of the team, and know my contribution is valued, it's appreciated. The 4th and final level of psychological safety is challenger safety. And this is really important if we want to be a learning organization, an innovative organization. Which high performance organizations need to be? Your people need to feel safe to challenge the status quo. They need to truly believe that if I ask a question that brings into consideration the effectiveness or the efficiency of the current way of doing things, that people aren't going to, circle the wagon and exclude me because I dared to challenge the status quo, because I dared to ask, could there be a better way of doing this? So it's important to get to and sustain high performance, that your people know it's okay to challenge, not in a way that's disrespectful, but in a way that's geared towards taking your performance to the next level. A final word about challenger safety before we move on. You don't come into the organization day one and have that right to challenger safety, because it's important to take the time to invest in learning how the organization works, all the 7 S's in the McKinsey framework, to learn it, to contribute within the system. And having then taken the time to learn the system, to contribute in the system, then you are better positioned to say, hey, I think there may be a better way to do this. What if? What about? Is it possible? So challenger safety comes after you've established and operated in the other levels of safety that preceded. So what is required in order for you to have psychological safety within your organization? We just went through the 4 phases as outlined by Timothy Clark. So here's what the people need to have in psychological safety to exist. It starts with a shared belief by the members of your team that it's okay to take risks. It's safe to take risks. Now, notice we say it's a shared belief, because if one person within your team does not feel safe, then it brings into question whether or not you have a psychologically safe environment. The second component is a sense of confidence that the team will not embarrass, reject, or punish you for speaking up with your ideas, with your questions, with your concerns, or sharing your mistakes. You are confident doing this is not going to harm me and my perspectives, my future within the organization, because this is a psychologically safe environment. And the final component now would be a team climate that's characterized by interpersonal trust and mutual respect. So on a one-on-one level, people feel comfortable being themselves with each other. They trust each other. They respect each other. It doesn't mean that they have to agree with everything that the other person is saying, but there is this ethos of trust and respect. So what can you expect to have in your organization when you do, in fact, have psychological safety? You will observe that people both give and receive feedback freely. So people know that their peers appreciate receiving feedback from them, and that they understand it must be done in a constructive manner, in a supportive manner. So people are open to both giving and receiving without getting defensive, without feeling territorial. When there's psychological safety, all members of the team raise issues and concerns rather than looking the other way, ignoring the problem, being silent about it, thinking, okay, not my responsibility, someone else will deal with it. Now, it's important to understand that psychological safety doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything that everybody has to say. It means that it is safe for you to disagree, that there won't be a backlash because of a difference of opinion, because we understand that out of differences of opinion, out of the constructive handling of conflict, we can emerge with the best possible solutions. Okay? With psychological safety, people ask for clarification. They ask the difficult questions. They admit when they need help and are confident in doing so because they know that there will be no adverse judgment of them, no adverse consequences or repercussions simply from asking for help. Again, in psychological safety, people offer solutions to problems rather than wait for the people higher up the chain of command to do so. And very importantly, because in dysfunctional organizations, people hide their errors. In organizations with psychological safety, people admit their errors and seek to learn from them. And it's not just the person making the error who has the potential to learn from it, but the entire organization can learn from errors. Now, there is a misperception out there that psychological safety goes hand in hand with low performance because people are safe. So with this slide, the intention is to outline for you the relationship between performance and psychological safety, the different scenarios that can obtain. So if we start in the lower left quadrant, in this context, we would see low performance and low psychological safety. So persons within such an organization would be quite apathetic, not too concerned about the quality of the work that I'm doing. And, it's not safe to be here anyway. So I am just going to fly beneath the radar and stay out of trouble. And hopefully I can get in and out without drawing attention to myself. In the lower right-hand side of the image now, we see the anxiety zone, which is characterized by high performance standards and low psychological safety. So this is where the folks are really stressed out because the ethos there says you have to perform, but at the same time, you don't have that psychological safety. You're afraid to be vulnerable, afraid to admit mistakes. You're not getting constructive feedback from your people, from those in authority. If we go to the top left-hand quadrant now, we see that's the comfort zone, which is characterized by low performance standards and high psychological safety. So people are safe, yes, but no one is holding them accountable for delivering. So that's not where you want to be. That's not a learning organization. To get to a learning organization, we have to go to the top right-hand quadrant where we see high performance standards and high psychological safety. So that's the goal. That's where you want to be to have a high performance organization. What are the benefits of getting to that learning zone? That's where the innovation takes place. That's where you become agile, adaptable, where you learn to successfully navigate a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, or VUCA environment. Creativity thrives in a learning organization such as this. Staff morale is high, problem solving is efficient, there's greater engagement, which we mentioned before, and higher productivity. So what are the factors that drive this type of organization? Positive relationships with the leaders within the organization. So going back to the McKinsey 7S framework, we have good alignment in terms of the style of the leadership. It facilitates, encourages, and celebrates psychological safety. We also, it's the nature of the work, because if you have the work that doesn't give people any autonomy, doesn't give them the opportunity to be innovative, to be creative, that does not lend itself to psychological safety. Supportive organizational practices. So you know that the organization is not going to have a public slaying if you make a mistake, a genuine mistake, once you are committed to learning and growing from it. Having strong relationship networks within the organization also helps to drive psychological safety. We spoke before about the importance of interpersonal trust and respect. Now, this penultimate element is really important because far too often we don't do enough to create what we refer to as practice fields. Now, we need to have the opportunity in the context of pursuing innovation and creativity to do things on a scale that won't be catastrophic if they don't work out exactly how we would like them to, exactly how we envision. So pilot projects, for example, would give persons the opportunity to practice something before a large rollout so that it gives them that level of safety. And then the final element is personality traits. So some people are genuinely risk averse. Some people are more comfortable with risk. And so how they show up in the organization will reflect that personality, but it is not the sole factor that will determine it, because they're the institutional factors that can help to mitigate personality traits that may be more risk averse, more conservative when it comes to contributing at a higher level. So that's the first floor, psychological safety. Our second floor is employee engagement. So once you've provided that psychological safety, you can then begin to leverage employee engagement. And what exactly is employee engagement? I offer 3 definitions for your consideration. Before we delve into the definitions, so let's have a look at the graphic on the right of your screen. You will notice that there is a red curve labeled the have to do curve. This reflects the minimum requirements, what you need to do to keep the job. Above the red curve, you will see a black curve, which is labeled the want to do curve. And the difference between these 2 curves, where the performance is higher in the want to do curve, is what we refer to as discretionary effort, going above and beyond. So employee engagement then is the propensity to exert discretionary effort, to go above and beyond. An alternative definition, employee engagement, is the extent to which employees feel passionate about their jobs, are committed to the organization, and put in the discretionary effort. Our third and final definition, employee engagement is the emotional commitment which an employee has to the organization and to its goals. Remember those things that we put in at the foundational level of our high-performance superstructure. Now, Gallup has done a great deal of research into employee engagement. In fact, they publish on this annually. However, there is a meta-study that they did where they looked at 82,000 work units globally. That translated into 1.8 million employees over 49 industries in 73 countries. And the results of that meta-analysis show that the top quartile, the top 25% of business units outperform the bottom 25%. By 10% when it comes to customer loyalty and engagement, by 21% when it comes to profitability, and look at this, 20% differential when it comes to productivity. These are numbers that cannot be overlooked if you want to run a successful business. So employee engagement matters. If you can get into the top 25%, in terms of the level of employee engagement, you can have a 20% higher level of productivity than your counterparts in the bottom 25%. So is this correlation statistically significant? Absolutely. Entities scoring in the top half on engagement nearly doubled their odds of success compared with their counterparts in the bottom half. Those in the 99th percentile, so the top 1%, had 4 times the success rate of those in the bottom 1%. And finally, the median differences between the top quartile, top 25%, and the bottom 25% were statistically significant. So this is not spurious correlation. This is not by chance. This is statistically significant relationship. Now, as I indicated, there's a lot of work that is done on this researching employee engagement. The 2022 Global Workplace Report is already out, and in this particular graph, I'd like to draw your attention to 2 things. We'll start first with the percentage of engagement. So you will note that we were on a slight upward trajectory, starting from 2009 all the way up to 2019. And then in 2020, and you remember, we associate that with the onset of the pandemic, we saw a drop in the level of employee engagement. There was a bit of recovery in 2021, but not quite yet back to the 2019 levels. But even more importantly, the trend line is important, but look at the absolute numbers in terms of the levels of employee engagement. Because if you're saying that you have 21% employee engagement, that means that 79% are not engaged. So they're either simply not engaged or they could be actively disengaged. So that's the vast majority, not exactly a recipe for high performance. If we look at the other line now, which is a trend line for the percentage of employees who are reporting that they're thriving, again, we see that we're capped out at 33%. So the vast majority of individuals within the organization are not describing themselves as thriving. So not the formula for high performance. So the argument for focusing on employee engagement. We saw from the statistics that employee engagement predicts a number of key business performance outcomes, profitability and productivity included amongst them, along with customer satisfaction. We know that managers are largely responsible for the conditions that drive employee engagement. So therefore, the logical conclusion is that once we understand the drivers of employee engagement, and then ensure that managers have the right talent and the commitment to deliver on said drivers, organizations can build employee engagement and thereby improve their business outcomes. So in Gallup's Meta research program, we identified the highest performing organizations. Gallup went further by looking at the features that distinguish those high-performing organizations from those who did not perform as well. And what they found is that there's a culture of high development. And it was that culture that then resulted in the high performance. The culture shift, and this is really important in terms of going back to McKinsey 7S, the leadership, the style, the culture shift was CEO and board supported and included continuous company-wide communication. So if you want to emulate that culture shift so you can reap the benefits of high performance, the leadership at the very top needs to drive the process, and there needs to be ongoing conversation about this shift, this new culture. Okay, so it didn't just stay at the level of the CEO and the board. These same high-performing companies educated team leaders on a new way of managing. What are the features of this new way of managing? It relies on high development and strength-based competencies. But the secret sauce is this last component here. They held managers accountable for the new way of managing. So let's talk some more about this new way of managing. Immediate supervisors and line managers, we've established they're the chief drivers in the workplace. They account for as much as 84% of how employees feel about their organization. They're the ones who can make employees feel inspired, enthusiastic, happy, excited, and they drive employee engagement. In contrast, those supervisors and managers who make employees feel insulted, upset, or irritated, they have the exact opposite effect. So here are the two models of management. The old model is to the left, and the high-performing model is to your right. So a boss, which is from the old paradigm, talks a lot. A coach, which is the new paradigm linked to safety and engagement, listens a lot. The boss tells, the coach asks. The boss presumes, the coach explores. The boss seeks control, the coach seeks commitment. The boss issues orders. The coach comes to you with challenges to help you maximize your potential. The boss works on, the coach works with. The boss assigns blame, the coach takes responsibility. Your boss is distant. Your coach is right there with you and makes contact with you. So we've put in the foundation. First floor was psychological safety. Second floor was employee engagement. So now we're ready to put the roof on our structure. And what is this roof? We're talking about employee satisfaction, a person's feelings of contentment with their workplace. This happens when they feel fulfilled and comfortable in their position. So, and we're in the Caribbean, we're in the hurricane season. We know that prevention is better than cure. We know that we need to keep checking our roof to make sure it's in good condition and in a position to withstand the hurricane. What are the ways in which we can do this? They include pulse surveys, we can have stay interviews with our people, and we can hold our managers accountable for the level of satisfaction within their teams. So just to recap, remember we have our foundation made up of a strong mission, cohesive vision, clear achievable goals, core values that foster a shared sense of purpose. Next level up, psychological safety. And that can then bear the weight and facilitate employee engagement. And ultimately, we cap it all off with employee satisfaction. So how does HR contribute to the building and maintenance of the superstructure? It's our job to align managers and employees with the culture that we're moving towards. It's our job to foster a sense of ownership for that culture, collective distributed ownership. It's our job to maintain accountability throughout all levels of the company. And how do we do that? We have to educate and equip leaders and the managers and supervisors to model the cultural values and to own responsibility for fostering the desired culture. It's not something, responsibility for the culture is not isolated to the C-suite, certainly not isolated to HR, but it's distributed throughout the organization. So when exactly do we do this? Throughout the entire employee life cycle, from recruitment to onboarding to how we run our performance management systems, to learning and development, to discipline, all cycles of the employees' time with us. We need to be promoting safety, promoting engagement, promoting satisfaction through our stewardship of the culture. How do we get it done? Like I said, take the lead on culture. Ensure that we align recruitment with culture and with the organizational goals and core values. We can ensure that our compensation philosophy is strategic. How we reward people is aligned. Remember, 7S framework. Everything needs to be in alignment for you to maintain that structure, maintain that balance. We keep leaders on track. We hold them accountable. We champion learning and development. That's where innovation and creativity bloom. And fundamentally, most importantly, we got to walk that talk. We practice what we preach. And always, always remember that accountability is the glue that ties commitment to results. So we've been talking a lot about culture, and there's a contrast that I want to flag for you. And the contrast is between a culture of blame and a culture of accountability. Those two cultures have different beliefs, they have different areas of focus, and they most definitely have different results. So a culture of blame believes that people are the problem, problems are headaches, and admitting weakness is career limiting. That's if you have a culture of blame. Contrast that with a culture of accountability, which believes people are problem solvers. Problems are learning opportunities, and we are all in a learning process. Instead of, in the blame context, focusing on who is wrong, with accountability, you focus on what is wrong. Blame focuses on finding fault. Accountability focuses on finding the facts. Blame focuses on assigning punishment. Accountability focuses on improving future results. And speaking of results, in a culture of blame, you hide the problems, you name and shame people who make mistakes, and you have distrust. In a culture of accountability, what you find is that problems are surfaced and are followed by the identification of solutions. People learn from mistakes and they trust each other. So there it is, our blueprint for building and sustaining a high-performance culture, which then enables you to have a high-performance organization. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor for any questions that you might have.